So, what we talk about in this presentation is the background of Mandalorian language, the alphabet and its pronunciation, pronouns and root words, and then building words from roots and affixes, and then building sentences from there. And then some ideas, there's like some tips and I guess mostly tips or practices, I guess, with translating. So, before we get to what is known as Mando'a, um, and the pronunciation for that is varies between everyone. When I'm speaking English, just like I'm in my normal accent, I say Mando'a. But when I'm trying to speak it correctly, I would say the A. Every A always sounds the same, so it's ma, it's ah at the after the M and at the end. So it's ah and ah, mando and ah. And the apostrophe there is called a baten, but it can be a glottal stop, just a stop in your speech. Mando ah, where you like oh, where you pause for a second. But it's not necessary, but sometimes it helps with pronunciation to use it. Sometimes it's not. So you can pronounce it however you like. Some people say Mando'a, just like in English, but technically, uh, eh, like the is not a vowel sound in Mando'a. But anyway, aside that I should have gotten to later when we do alphabet. um, Before we get to Mando'a, we have a few things that are called languages of the Mandalorians. The first one would be Notran Cant, which Notran is the original name of the planet Coruscant, and the Tong were the original Mandalorians, and they were from Notran when it was called Notran. And they spoke in Notran Cant. This was before Mando'a was ever made, so it doesn't resemble it at all, and it kind of just looks like funky space German. Um, but it shows up in the Shadows of the Empire soundtrack in I think it's the Destruction of Xizer's Palace soundtrack as like chanting in the background. Um, but yeah, the only thing from No Trent Camp that is in Mando'a is the words da, werda, and verda, which is dark, shadows, and warriors. Um, and that's just the name of like a poem that was written in No Trent Cant, but only the name is actually in Mando'a da werda verda, but everything else in it is not related to it at all, really. At least in real life, it might be in lore, but it's not in real life. So I don't remember when that came out. I think that was like 90 something. But the next thing that came out was Attack of the Clones. And with that came the Mandalorian script with an E, as it was spelled then. Um, Probably erroneously. I don't know if the way it was. I don't know when it was first ever spelled with an O, but anyway. Um, or I guess it'd be with an A there. But that was created by Philip Metchin, and that's the script that you can see at the bottom. And that script was, like I said, created for Attack of the Clones for Jango Fett's Slave One like readouts. Um, yeah, that is technically the first official script.
Is that the same one that's used for well, spoilers, Book of Boba Fett when he shows him the chain code?
No,
No. Oh, okay.
and that is, I think that's in season. That's
Of
in something
Mandalorian
without
season.
spoiling
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But yeah, that is not this script actually.
Oh,
This
okay.
script, as far as I know, only appears in Attack of the Clones and maybe Republic Commando.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't remember seeing it anywhere else. So yeah.
Cool.
So the next thing that was created was at the time called Mandalorian language, but we now know as either Concord Dawnish, which is uh, a kind of more precise term, but is more commonly known as Concordian. Um, in Legends, there was the book The Cessus Deception, where there was a clone who was called Jango Tot, and Tot was supposed to mean brother in the language of the Mandalorians, and then it was later retconned into be the language of the dialect from Concord Dawn. Um, and it was called Concordian. Um, but this was I'll get to it, but this was before the Clone Wars came out, so there was no moon called Concordia. So at the time, they just called it Concordian because there was only Concord Dawn, so Concordian only meant Concord Dawnish. Um, but now it's let me think. So yeah, it started. It was just called Mandalorian in the Cessus Deception, but then it expanded by Karen Traviss later on um, in her novel series in Republic Commando. And that's where she called it Concordian. Um, and later on in like a forum post, she called it Concord Dawnish. So she called it both, and one is technically published, which was Concordian, but because of the canon, it's a little confusing. So I call it Concord Dawnish. Anyway, Mando'a. um, Republic Commando. It started with the game actually. Um, the first thing that was commissioned um, was the lyrics for the soundtrack. Rather, the first thing of Mando'a was the lyrics for Vodeon, for Cartator, for all those, for Da Huerta Verda, which is a song that shows up in as well in there, which doesn't contain No Trincant. It's a kind of a reinterpretation using more modern Mando'a. But that was created by Jesse Harlan, who was the composer for the game. And around the same time as the game was coming out, or rather in production, um, Karen Traviss was sent the lyrics because she was working on the novel tie-in series, the first book, Hard Contact. And so she basically took the lyrics and expanded lexicon and grammar and a whole bunch of stuff into what we call Mando'a now. Um, yeah. So that she worked on Mando'a for a few years, I guess maybe 3 or 4 years, until the Clone Wars came out. And the Clone Wars, I don't know if you guys remember or if you're familiar, but Clone Wars basically retconned half of all the Clone Wars multimedia project from before, which included Republic Commando. Um, so she couldn't continue her series without making changes to fit the Clone Wars canon. Um, so she didn't do that. So she stopped working on Mando'a and basically said, you know, I set up the basics, take it from there. Sorry, I hit my mic. Um, so that's where we get to Concordian and Fandoa, which is just a term for fan Mando'a. Um, so the first ever, as far as I know, fan Mando'a was what we now know as Concordian. It wasn't called Concordian; it was just called Mandalorian, and it was created by a fan on I think Empire at War forum post or maybe it was the force.net or something like that. It was a forum post. And basically, before Karen had released her dictionary with like her um, changes to it and additions of grammar and whatnot, someone else had taken the lyrics from Republic Commando and tried to translate them themselves, like their own interpretation of the lyrics. Um, and as far as I know, it was shared at least one other time. But I don't know how large it was. But this was before Clone Wars came out. So when Clone Wars came out, for some reason, when they created or they did the Mandalore arc, they had the moon called Concordia, which was a creation for the show. And they had someone speak in a dialect, in a Mandalorian dialect from Concordia. And they technically didn't call it Concordian, but most people call it Concordian. If you look at the Wikipedia page, it lists both Concord Donish and Concordian as the same thing, but they're not. What Concordian actually is that original fan-made forum post dictionary, for some reason brought into canon. Instead of using Karen Travis's, I assume because of like some kind of animosity between Karen, because she didn't really want to have to make all these changes to her characters. That's why she left. So I assume they didn't want to use her dictionary, but that's conjecture. Maybe they just didn't have it when they wrote the episode. So they just looked up Mando'a dictionary and found that somewhere. I don't know. That could be. Or maybe they wanted it to be different. Maybe they just wanted to include fan stuff, because that is not the only fan stuff they included. And I can go in more in depth on Concordian if we do the or dialects in general when we do a weekend presentation. But for now, the other thing that I mentioned that was fan made that was in Clone Wars is they didn't use this script. Like I said, this script only was in Attack of the Clones, as far as I know, and maybe Republic Commando. In the Clone Wars, they actually used Eric Stormtrooper's version 1 script, if you're familiar. If you go to mandoa.org and you go to the transcribe, I'm pretty sure it has Eric's 1 and 2. It might say new and old.
Eric Stormtroopers. Sorry.
Eric Stormtroopers, yes.
Okay.
And that showed up in the Clone Wars, and they didn't use Mando'a, the language, like I said. They just used the fan-made script, and they used the fan-made dialect. But there was no Mando'a, and there wasn't this this official script. However, the fan script is pretty close and also fairly ubiquitous. The like Rusk community, like the Rusk dictionary language, I guess, uses a modified version of that. And it's the easiest way to tell is usually the M is most distinct. The M looks like it looks like if you took the T and you rotated it, you know, from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Looks like that. So yeah, as I was saying, sorry, I'm getting over this sick. I'm scatterbrained.
It's all good, mate. No worries.
Where was I? Fandoa, yeah. The Rusk dictionary is what I mentioned. It is another fan-made kind of dialect. The best way to access it is through mandoa.ru, and then you can do /ENG for English, because it's a Russian site. But that was created by Tauger, and it's probably the largest known fan dictionary for a long time. But the one that is primarily in the English space is the Mando creator fan like dialect, uh, which incorporates some from Talgers and also just a lot of other stuff and stuff created. And I'll have links to all these things, and yeah, I'll go over that. But I said I was going to do the quick version, and I spent the entire time on the background page. So, fortunately, pronunciation is pretty quick. Do we have any questions on that at all?
The only thing I was going to ask was, you said that that font at the bottom was only used in one place. Is that not also what's on the Mandalorian's gauntlets?
No.
Looks
So
similar in places.
yeah.
I
I
think
guess
L and M look
I
the
should
same.
add a note there for me to write that down. The the one that they use in Disney shows. So ever since Rebels, The Mandalorian, and the Book of Boba Fett, and I think those are the only ones that have used it since. They use their own script that is unique. Uh, I don't have a picture of it right here, but it's right on this page. No, no, this is not on this page. It's on. I'll show you it later.
Thank you.
Actually, I can just show you it right now because I can just go to Mandocator. So this is the best approximation of it. This is technically a fan-made version of the font, but this is what Disney uses.
Okay.
So as you can see, it's slightly different. We don't have the official version on here, but we do have Eric Stormtrooper's V2, which is the closest to the official version. The way you can tell if something is Eric Stormtroopers or if it's Metshin, like the official from Attack of the Clones script, is C. If the C looks like that, then you know you've got Eric Stormtroopers. If the C looks like this, oops, then you know you've got the Metshin script, the original Mandalorian script. And I have something that I can post for that. I have a comparison chart. So, alphabet and pronunciation. Like I said earlier, pronunciation is fairly regular, but there's a few exceptions. So I'll kind of go over them quickly. I'm going to do the consonants first because I can breeze through them. If you're familiar with English, which I assume you are, then you'll get most of these right.
More or less, yeah.
If you're familiar with any Indo-European language, you'll get most of these right. Actually, if you're familiar with Indo-European language, you'll probably be fine with Mando'a as a whole, because although it is a constructed language, it's heavily biased towards Indo-European, but not exclusive. So, B, I don't have IPA. If IPA helps you all, I can give you an IPA chart, but B is your B sound. D is D sound. I'll come back to C. G is a G, a hard G sound. H is it's just like an aspirated herb, because you guys say herb, right?
Yeah.
But also, sometimes an H comes at the end of the word and people don't say it, like instead of saying meh as meh, they'll say meh or meh. I usually like to stress my H's at the end so that you can tell the difference between something, like meh and meh or teh and teh. But it's technically not super necessary if you don't like. But it's not a guttural H. But I'll get to more exceptions with that in the future. But the J is a J sound. Your jump. There are different dialects of Mando'a, different regional variances and accents, and there's also archaic Mando'a. So if you've heard the Republic Commando soundtrack, you might have heard J pronounced like a y, like a Y sound. In the archaic and in some dialects, it's pronounced like a y, like a Y sound. But the standard, most of the time, it's a j sound. K is K, L is L, M is M, N is N, P. R is undefined. It is any R you want to put in there. If it's a rhotic R, if it's a tapped R, if it's a trilled R, if you want to like throw in a Teutonic R or whatever you want, whatever you want. As long as it's distinct enough, and you don't even have to be consistent with it because Karen Travis wasn't even. So whatever helps you pronounce the word easier. That's a pretty consistent thing, is pronunciation varies based on what's easiest. So S is S, T is T, V is V, W, W, and Y is Y. When Y is acting as a consonant, that's a Y sound. So the one that I said I'd come back to is C. When it's just C, and you have, it can be just like English, an S or a K, but there's specific rules, and it's based on the letter, the vowel that comes after it. If C is followed by an A, by an O, or by a U, like those are open vowels, I think, then it's a K sound. For example, ka, or kun, or kopad. But if it's followed by an I or an E, then it's an S sound. It's like sin or setar. Yeah, so, and if it's a Y, then I'll get to that later. Actually, I'll go ahead and do the consonant combo since I started with consonants. So if C gets a Y, then it turns into an SH. And if the Y is before it, then it can sound like a vowel. The Y will be pronounced like ish. So if it's YC, then it's ish. And if it's CY, then you don't say she, it's just sh. And it says SH or CH. And that's basically like, there's only one word that uses CH, and it's buche, and it's optional, and Karen's the only one who does it. And so I don't know why, but apparently CY can be a CH, but it never is except for that one word. So CH is the normal CH. SH is your normal SH. TS is like tsunami, if you know that, or if you don't, it's the sound at the end of the word cats. If you cut out the cat and you just keep the tss. And TS rather comes at the beginning of words, so kind of like tsunami does, which is different from English. English doesn't really do that, except for loan words like tsunami, which most people just say as tsunami anyway. But the weird one is VH. I don't know what Karen said, like Karen Travis, the author, wanted VH to be, but VH is something that sounds like an F, or like a V that's really breathy. Or, in my opinion, the best sound for it, if you're familiar, is the voiceless bilabial fricative, which is basically making an F. If you know how to make an F, it's putting your teeth to your lips and blowing. And the way I do VH is a lot like that, but instead of touching your teeth to your lips, you just put your lips close together and blow, like phew, phew, that was close. Is like kind of like that. And that's a pretty common like sound in things like Maori and like Celtic languages and Japanese. So I thought it was a good alternative to F, because the only thing she says about VH is that it sounds like F, but not that it is F. And the reason she made it is because there was no F in. Oh yeah, I guess I should talk about that. There's no F, X, Q, or Z in Mando'a. And because the most popular Mandalorian ever's name, Fett, starts with an F, that's why the VH exists. um,
Yeah, had
so
to get
yeah,
around the pothole there somehow, didn't they?
yeah. So for vowels, like I said, it's mostly regular. There's some variance. A is pretty much always ah. You might hear people say ah, but technically it's always supposed to be ah. Or if you do ah every time, you know. But regional variance, pronunciation differences. Technically, Karen Travis said that there's a whole swath of different ways you can pronounce it, and you're not going to be wrong because you're not going to correct the guy with armor, you know, and a blaster. So the E is the one that's a little weird, and it's an eh sound, like E, like bed eh, or it's an A sound, like cafe. When it's at the end of the word, usually it's an A sound. Um, if it's in a word or at the beginning, it can be either. Um, it's up to you. It can change. It doesn't change the meaning. Is what I'm. That's it's allophonic, so they both mean the same thing. They're both the same sound without changing the meaning really. So I is an E sound. It's not an I sound. There is no I sound. It's only E. So this one is pretty common with English speakers to like instead of saying beak, which means it, they say bic, like bic lighter. I don't know if you have bic lighters in the UK, but
Yeah, I think so.
it's an E sound.
But I sort of run into that trap with words like ibik. I tend to say ibik, or yeah, that definitely sounds
Yeah,
more like ibik.
yeah, I
Um,
do too. Just
yeah,
it's mostly because I'm not used to saying that because I used to saying in English it would be ibic
yeah,
or ibic. But uh, when you're speaking with Mandalorian, you have to try to constrain yourself to the phonetics of um, what's correct in the language.
yeah.
And obviously, like I said, because there's variance, you can technically be correct as long as you know what you're doing. That's what matters, in my opinion. Because if you want to pronounce it one way, that's fine. Because I purposefully do things differently than I know is intended, just because I think it's better. Because I think it's more logical that way. And also, it's hard to follow what the pronunciations really are. Like, yaim means home, and throughout Karen's dictionary, it like the pronunciation guide has it as yaim, as yame, and as yaim. So who knows? Just go for it. And I'll get to that vowel sound specifically, but e, like I said, or rather I is e. O is an O sound. It's not an or an ah sound. It's an O sound. And U is an oo sound. Uh, there's no Y at the beginning like a U. It's just oo. And then Y is when it's acting as a vowel is an E sound, like an E. So the vowel combinations, we call these diphthongs. Diphthongs means it's two vowel sounds that have like slid into one syllable. And these 7 are the only vowel combinations that form diphthongs. If there's two vowels that are next to each other that are not these 7, then they're two separate syllables. For example, you and I, like in the word buir, bu-ir, it's not buir like weird. I know I can't even say that. What's another one? O and E. I don't think there even is an O and E next to each other in all of Mando'a. But if there were, it would be O-E, not O-E, however you would say that. So just these seven.
I think you slipped into some sort of form of Oriental there.
So AI, AI. AI is pronounced I. Ah is A sound, E is the E sound, and it's slid I. Just like you're saying the English word for the letter I. Um, you may see, like I said, some people pronounce this as A, like yame, Y-A-I-M, which I say as yime. Some, excuse me, some people say as yame. But technically correct, A and I goes together, A and E, I. Same for A and Y because it's the same vowel sound, but same exception. This exception is also baked in. So, for example, teil, teilir is to hold, and you'll hear people say tile or you'll hear people say tail because it's spelled T-A-Y-L. It hears people say tail. But tile is the given correct definition or pronunciation. But at the same time, kaish, the universal pronoun kaish, K-A-Y-S-H, is an A-Y, but it's not really pronounced kaish. No one pronounces it kaish. Well, some people pronounce it kaish. Most people pronounce it kaish because Karen Travis pronounced it kaish. So A-Y, if you're not sure, it's probably I. If it's kaish or naish, then it's aish. If then it's A sound. Like saying the letter A. Um, yeah, that's you might have run into that. It's pretty mostly common with English speakers because they're used to the AY and the AI sound making a different sound. Like especially like DAY in English is day, so you think day, okay, so it's tail. But yeah. So AU is the last A combination you can make, and that's an ow sound, like ow. AU. Ah, ooh, ow. Slid together. The EY is a really rare combination, but it does exist, and I guess it's basically pronounced the same way as E at the end of a word is. A, like cafe. If you spelled cafe with a Y at the end, it would be pronounced the same. OI and OY by extension are oi. It's just oi. Simple as boy. The OA is the kind of a weird one. It's O and ah to aw. I guess I think Karen Travis said that it's pronounced like raw. That's why I put the AW there. Like a British person would say raw, which maybe you're familiar with that. So like the word face is T-R-O-A-N. Tron, I say as Tron. Which I don't say it's not an O sound or an A sound because people, if I say that, then they're gonna say Tron or they're gonna say Tran or Trone, but it's Tron. It's kind of it sounds like Tron, but it's not Tron. It's Tron. I don't know if that makes sense. Those are the pronunciation guide. Does that make sense to you all?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
I just wanted to double check with the tongue.
Yes.
With that,
The talking about the
the
like the
race.
first Mandalorians.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So going by the combo there, should it be Town?
If you were pronouncing it like if like in Mando'a, it would be town, yes, but
Right.
I think it's
Guessing
I
that'd be
think
their
the
own.
Tong were named before Mando'a was created,
Right.
and I think they were named after a real thing, the Tong.
Oh yeah, yeah, that makes
Um,
sense. Yeah, there's an empire, wasn't it?
yeah, I
Yeah.
think. Um, but I have heard town. I have heard that before.
All right.
Um, and I assume that's how they would say it. Either if they spelled it, if modern Mandalorians that is spelled it like we do, they would say town. That's how they would pronounce that.
Right.
If they were pronouncing it the same but changed the spelling to match the pronunciation,
Mhm.
then they would spell it with an OA instead of an AU.
Right. Cool. Makes sense.
Like that's the sound tong. Yeah.
Tong.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, one I forgot, which I mentioned earlier, was the baten, which is the apostrophe. It can be a glottal stop if you are familiar with that. The oh, if you stop your throat, you can feel it. Um, and you don't always have to pronounce it. If it's hard to pronounce it in a certain spot, like it's really awkward, then don't do it. Um, and sometimes just you can just drop it, or you can pronounce it as kind of an unstressed vowel. So like the word that's there is ba jurier, and you don't have to say ba jurier. You can say ba jurier without the stop if it's hard to say that, or you can say, well, I mean that's really the only two ways to say it. Either say it or don't. If it's between like two consonants, then it can be like a vowel sound, like a unstressed vowel sound. Like douche is bad. Sha is the comparative ending, and normally you just add it to the end. But because douche and sha start with the same sound, um, you kind of pronounce the baten as a I sound, douchesha. You don't really force that sound like douchesha. Karen Travis would have you believe that it's douchisha, but yeah, don't listen to her. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She only wrote the language. So, um, pronouns. So yeah, let me disclaimer that I should have put at the beginning. I mostly promote Mando'a like standard what Karen Travis does to most people. Um, but I do have my own way of speaking that is different from other people, and I do also, like I said, in the primary English space, the dialect, like the fan dialect that we use, is the Mando creator one. So I would say that I am biased towards myself and that. So if you pronounce something or say have a different word or whatever differently than I do, it's not necessarily wrong. Yeah. Um, I know someone. So before I get to these, which I can get really quickly, in one of the articles that Karen Travis wrote, she said that customizing your speech is like customizing your armor to a Mandalorian. Um, basically, people do what suits them, and who are you to tell them otherwise? Because they're a Mandalorian, you know. What are you gonna do? Try to piss them off, being a grammar cop, you know. So that is one thing that's kind of annoying about it being conlang is like if every single rule has an exception, then how do you know what rules to follow and what rules to break? It's just something you kind of get used to, and eventually, just like customize, like coming into your own armor, eventually you come into your own way of speaking. So yeah,
I really
editor,
like that analogy.
put
That's
that
really
at the
good.
beginning. Yeah, so pronouns. Really simple pronouns in Mandalorian. Can be confusing because of how simple they are, but for the most part, I think its simplicity is to its benefit. For the most part. So in the first person, first person is the only person that has a different possessive form. As you can see, the singular first person is ni. That's N-I, ni. And that is I or me. There is no difference between subject or object. It is ni at the beginning of the sentence, it's ni at the end of the sentence. And the plural, we or us, is me. You can say, like, you can really pronounce that H if you want, like me. I can't even do it because of my throat. Me. But yeah, you don't have to say that. You can just say me, like as if it was just M and I. But the possessives that are different is ner. That's the singular, my or mine. That's both the possessive pronoun mine and the possessive article or adjective my. And the plural version of that, our or ours, is kun. One thing that I didn't mention that I guess I should about this, I guess I can keep on this page. Double vowels in, yeah, I guess I'll go back to this. Double vowels in, you guys see my cursor or does that show up or not?
Yeah, I can
It
see
does
that.
indeed.
Yeah, we see it.
Okay. There are a lot of random double vowels in Mandalorian, and most of the time they have no effect on the word at all. You'll see in Karen's dictionary, the official dictionary, and also most fan dictionaries, some have their own pronunciations that they've changed. But based on hers, if it starts with a, or rather, if it's a double O, or if it's a double E, then it sounds like what you expect in English. So like double O sounds like oo, like the letter U, and double E sounds like E, like the letter I. And I don't personally like this, and it's only in like 4 words that this exists. So personally, I don't change my pronunciation for double letters. So for example, Isu is the Karen Travis dictionary word for gas, like a gas. It's EESU, and it sounds like it should be spelled ISU, Isu, but it's spelled with a double E. Some people change the spelling to be an I, or some people instead they keep the spelling the same, but they change the pronunciation to keep the regular E pronunciation, which would be or a. So you can say esu or esu. So that is another thing that you might hear different. Some people keep their double E's and O's the same sound. Some people change them as Karen Travis does, like isu instead of esu. And most of the time, if you're keeping the vowel sound the same, if you're familiar with vowel length, I'm not sure if you are, but vowel length is just holding the vowel for longer. So like instead of saying esu, which would be like ESUU, esu, it's esu, esu. The E is longer because it's doubled. Or instead of saying elite, alit, which would be like AALIT, for family, it's actually spelled ALIIT. So I say it elite with the I being longer because it's doubled. So that's something that I need to write down in here because I always forget to mention that until I come to Kun right there. So the U, it sounds like just a regular U sound, but some people pronounce it longer. Like instead of kun, they say kun. So yeah. The rest of the pronouns are basically all the same. You in second person is just you across the board. You, y'all, yours, yours. Some people will say gar, which is you, then an, which is all, you all, literally y'all. Gar an or gan. But otherwise, standard is all the same in second person. Third person is all the same, but different for number. So singular third person, whether it be he or she or a any living being, you would say Keish. Um, if it's multiple living beings, you'd say Val. And that is the same in possessive. So instead of saying he or she, you say his or hers is Keish, and it's the way you would tell the difference is by context mostly. And Val is as well as theirs and their. Like I said, context is kind of the biggest, most important thing in Mando'a, because of how limited the speech is. Like I said, it's really simple. It's a really simple grammar, really simple lexicon. So there's some inference that is required when like reading or listening to it, because if you hear Keish first, you don't know if it's going to be he or she, or if it's supposed to be a possessive until you hear what comes next. You know, if a verb comes next, then you know most likely it's a just a regular singular pronoun, he or she. And then it's a if it's followed by like, I don't know, house, Yaim, if it's Keish Yaim, then it's probably his house or her house or their house or whatever. Val Yaim, yeah. One thing that I don't have on here is the non-person pronouns, which I can go over all of them on the weekend if we want to do that. But the main one is beak, as we mentioned, is it. And some people ask me, is Val they? Does that only for living things, or can we use if is plural its like beak? If you have two beak and beak, are they Val? Or is it bike, like pluralizing beak? And I don't know. I've seen some people pluralize pronouns before, like instead of saying this, which is e-beak, they'll they'll say these, which is ebk. They'll add the e to the end to pluralize it. Some people do that. Most people don't. A lot of people just use Val, but I like to think Val is probably for people only, and that beak, you can either have it. You can either use beak with the plural ending or without, and just imply the fact that it's plural by the fact that the next word is plural. You know, it doesn't need to be the pronoun doesn't need to be plural. So yeah, any questions on pronouns?
I'm all good.
Okay. So words. In Mando'a, words come from roots and affixes. Making a new word in Mando'a is tricky because, yeah, the author didn't really have a system for making new words. It was really, she made a lot of really intricate etymologies that she has absolutely no documentation on, that you basically just have to learn the language to be able to figure out. And that's how, that's why I say to people, I don't recommend making compound words and such until you're more familiar, because a lot of compounds are not immediately obvious. And it takes familiarity with the language to be able to get those on the fly. But roots, like I said, are the base of the word, the main part of the word. And sometimes it is obvious, like ja it comes from jate. Jate means good. And ja is used in a number of compounds, like jahail, or rather jahal, which means health, or literally good breath. Um, or yeah, the du from douche, pretty common. Duhal is unhealth. I think that might be a fan word. Let me think of one that it isn't. Dukar. Dukar means late. Du obviously from douche. Dukar literally means bad time. But sometimes it's not obvious. Like bru in ori bru comes from buruk. Buruk means danger. And ori bru means emergency. And ori is a intensifier. So ori buruk shortened to ori bru, which, like you said, if you didn't already know that buruk, and if you didn't already know what buruk meant and ori bru meant, and you weren't familiar, you probably wouldn't immediately connect those. Like, yeah, it's obvious it's B, U, and R's, but the order is a little bit different, and some things are left out. So most of the time, a root can be a noun, but not always. Like ja would be not anything by itself. You need the full word jate. But there are some things that are full words by themselves, like ori. Ori by itself is its own word. It's actually not a noun; it's an adjective. Let me think of a one that is its own word. I'll think of one later. Many roots can be found by dropping the verb suffix or the adverb suffix from a word, and the adjective/adverb suffix is the same. In Mando'a, there's no difference in form. Like in English, we have good, like he is good, as in a good person, and he is like doing well, like he's doing something well. You don't say he's doing something good. In Mando'a, it's the same. And there's technically two different forms, but they don't change the meaning. It's just for pronunciation, which I'll get to. Yeah, and sometimes you'll find root in multiple words. I have no idea what that means. I should really rewrite this thing. Roots can be modified with affixes, as I've mentioned before, like adding ori, or combined with other roots to make a compound. One second, I need to take a drink. Any questions? This slide is a little more concept heavy. Okay. Also, if anyone's typing in the chat, like the text chat, I'm not seeing it because I only have one monitor. So let me know if anyone types in the text chat. Yeah. So here's an example of an etymology or like a word family. Tailir is a dictionary word that means to keep or to hold, or to preserve. And it's used in a lot of phrases, but it's also used in a lot of compounds. Primarily, there are some compounds that are phrases that have been shortened into compounds, and there are some compounds that are just words. But like these ones, these next two, kartailir and tailud, they come from phrases. Kartailir means to hold in the heart. Kar comes from something which I'll get to, and tailir is hold. Kar means, in this sense, heart. But it's used as this phrase is shortened into a compound and used as the word to know, to be aware of. I guess some cultures see the heart as the seat of knowledge rather than the brain. And tailud is another phrase that is shortened into a compound but still used as a phrase. So the difference being like kartailir, it has the verb ending. You get the IR ending, or rather just the vowel R. It doesn't have to be I. Because it has a verb ending, you can see that it's a infinitive. So you can use it as the verb know, to know. But tailud doesn't have the verb ending there because it's been cut off by the compound. So the way you would use this is like you would put a pronoun first, like kesh. Kesh tailud would be he or she or they or whatever takes a break. Kesh tailud, he's taking a break or he takes a break. There's no continuous tense, but takes or is taking. So yeah, it's still used as the full phrase, taking a break. But it doesn't use it's not like a word that you conjugate. There's no verb ending there. So they all have tile in common, which, as I said, comes from hold or keep. So you can see, like, by studying the dictionary, you'll start to see patterns like, oh, tile is all of these things. Then it's probably, as you can see, like tailud isn't immediately obvious because it doesn't say hold or keep. It says take, and take is technically a different word. It has a different entry even. But it's used here in a different way. It's like preserving. I'll get to that actually. Use the root for a new adjective. Yeah. I need to structure this better. Use the root for a new adjective. Tailish. Okay, so the adjective endings, like I said, you can add two different endings. Ish is one, YC, or la, which is LA. And like I said, they mean the same thing. But since you've been able to identify tail as a root, then you would know that you could take off the verb ending from tailir, because tile doesn't have its own entry, so you wouldn't necessarily know that it's a root if you didn't know what conjugation was. So you can add tailish, and it's up to you what verb or what adjective ending you use. Whether ish or la, it's based on pronunciation, but if it has something in the dictionary already, it's usually best to use that one, just because people know that one. But if you don't, then yeah, then you can use whatever. It doesn't matter. So kar Tyler, like I said, comes from kar and ta. Karta means heart. Kar itself is a root that means core, or like centermost part or essence. But karta means heart, as in the beating heart. And tailud, like I said, it is tail, and it uses udes, which is rest. So as I was saying earlier, but I interrupted myself, was tailud, you might not immediately recognize that it means hold or keep tail, because it doesn't use that in the definition. It uses take. So you'd have to recognize the pattern. Okay, it's used in a non-literal way here. It's used like as an idiom. This is a phrase. So phrases in Mando'a, they don't always follow the rules. That's something important to know. Phrases can break word order, and they can do a whole lot of funky stuff. So yeah. So whenever you're doing that, if you're taking a root and then trying to make something new with it, make sure that another word or synonym doesn't already exist that you could use. Or you could try looking through like the etymology of the word you're trying to translate and see if there's another alternative you could use. Because not everyone agrees on the meaning of a word just reading it off a page, if someone writes a fanfic or something with Mando'a, and they use a lot of compound words that they made themselves, then anyone reading that is going to have to decipher every single sentence, trying to figure out, okay, what was the author thinking when they wrote this? Because they didn't leave like a glossary, for example, of these are all of the compounds that I created. So it's best not to do that on the fly. Sometimes, or eventually, you might get really good at making them on the fly and making them make sense on the fly. But for the most part, it's best not to do that. And if you think of a good one, then share it. Submit it. You can submit it to Mando Creator. You can share it on anywhere really. Just as long as just see if other people agree, and if that word catches on, then it might then its meaning will make sense to people because then it's publicly known. Apologize for the pixels on that photo. I don't know why it's so low res, but these are some of the affixes that you can use. As I mentioned before, the comparative is sha, shya, and the superlative is ne. So like jate is good, jate sha is better, and jatne is best. You can say ori, which is, as I said, sometimes roots can be used as affixes. Ori is its own root, which means great or big on its own. But not all affixes are standalone words. Like ika. Ika is a suffix that can go at the end of a word to make something seem smaller, more familiar, or cuter, or just literally smaller. But it's not a word by itself. Yeah. So I'll try to
like you've
breeze
got
through
the
these.
word vod for brother, sister,
Mhm.
sibling. Then you've got vodika, which is younger or smaller sibling as well, right?
Yeah. Right. So there's some debate on how to say younger and older sibling. Some people like vodka because it can be used as like a nickname. It might not always be your necessarily younger brother. It might be someone who's smaller than you and you call them vodka, even though they might be older than you or something.
I
If
love
you're
that.
close with them, um, people usually, uh, but uh, but preferably you say vodka for younger, and then people say orivod for big brother. Yeah. We do have words for younger and older. It would be varsha and rugsha. If you wanted to be literal, you could say that. If you wanted to make it absolutely clear, that's evarla means uh, or rather varla
I think
means
it's old, isn't it?
young,
Oh, young. Sorry, yeah,
young.
young. Yeah.
And so you could say varsha, younger, varne, youngest, um, and rug means old. Rugla, it means old. So you could say rugsha or rugisha if you want to like do like a sound there. Rugisha for older, and rugne for oldest, and then vod for sibling. Yeah. So some prefixes that we have are the tense prefixes. They're really rare to use because for the most part, you speak in present tense. And if something happened in the past or the future, you reference that with like a reference word. So like instead of saying I went to the store yesterday, you say I go to the store yesterday. Still, yesterday, so it happened in the past. Or tomorrow, right? So the tense prefixes aren't necessary, but some people do use them when you want to specify that something necessarily happened in the past or necessarily will happen in the future, but not right now. Which is my preferred way of using them as present exclusive tense, basically. And then, as I mentioned, ori can be used as a prefix. Is also its own word. but it's an intensifier, like more. Anything you add ori to, it's just a bigger or more version of that. Whether it be that a noun or a adjective, adverb. The nu, ne, or n negation. So that makes a noun or an adjective or a verb negative. So like narir means to do. Ne narir or nu narir, it's up to you, would be to not do. Wadasla means wealthy. Ne wadasla means broke as. Osik. Osik means dung. Broke as dung. Osik. So newadas literally means not wealthy, but it doesn't mean not wealthy as in medium class. It means not wealthy, as in unwealthy. And then the other, this is, like I said, this isn't everything, but this another prefix that is most common is probably the possessive prefix, and that is be, be. You can say be or be for the e there. The ones that are just the consonant and the baten, the apostrophe, those are for if the next word starts with a vowel. For example, at the bottom here, this is the possessive form in Mando'a. So Boba owns the sword. So it's the kad be Boba. Boba is a word by itself. It means of. So kad be Boba is sword of Boba. And if it started with an A, like atin, then you would say kad batin. You just put them together, or you could say ba'atin if you wanted to, but I say batin. And that is the easiest way of doing or rather, that's the most clear way of doing compounds. You have y, be, x, where x owns y, as I did a little equation there. And then the other way of doing possessives, is by making a compound. By saying boba kad as one word, boba kad, then it means the boba sword, or literally Boba's sword. But the problem with doing the compounds is some people might not know that you're doing a possession. They might think you're making some weird compound, if it isn't like a name, for example. Yeah. So for suffixes, the most common one is the plural suffix, and that is e at the end of a word, or that ends with a consonant, or se if it ends with a vowel. And it's pronounced like a or se. What's the thing I was going to mention about plurals? Oh yeah, if something ends with c, like balak means opportunity. Balak, B-A-L-A-C, balak. If you add an e, then technically there's an e after a c, and when there's an e after a c, you pronounce it as an s. But we don't do that with plurals. Some people might. I've never heard anyone who does that though. So you would just say balake. You would add the e to the end without changing the c to an s sound. And some people will separate the e with a baten, with an apostrophe, so that people know you're not supposed to pronounce the c as an s. Yeah. So ish and la, as I said, are the adjective and adverb endings. They're basically the same. Some dialects, like the Rusk dialect, uses ish and la with the same root to mean different things. Like, I think they have chab bish and chab la, which is scared or scary. But that distinction isn't in most dialects, and it's not in standard Mando'a. It could be a convenient distinction, but it's not one that is common. And there are other ways of getting around that. So I guess probably the most common actual suffix is the verb ending, which is a vowel and an R. I, A, O, U, or E. That I think the order of like prevalence is probably I, A, U, O, no, A, O, U. Yeah, this might be the order of prevalence actually. But basically, IR verbs are really common. AR and OR verbs, they exist. UR verbs are pretty rare, not super rare. And ER verbs are, there's only like two. The main reason why, if you're making a new verb out of a root and you're adding one, I would recommend doing anything but ER, just because when you conjugate a verb, when it's the active verb, you remove the R and you have just the E, and that looks like a plural sometimes. Like ganader means to choose. Ganade means either choices or choose. Like Kesh ganade could either mean his choices or he chooses. That's why context is important. That's why I also don't use ER if you can avoid it. And then Ika, like we said, is the diminutive. So standard word order is subject, verb, object, like English. Like I said earlier, phrases and colloquial stuff, idioms, stuff like that, metaphors, they can break word order, and they do quite often. But if you're making your own sentence, you're going to want to start with your subject, who's doing the action, your verb, what are they doing, object, what are they doing it to. And yeah, and there's technically more things that you can add there, like, but it's kind of freeform there. Like adjectives and adverbs, they can come before or after. It technically whatever makes it clearest. Like Vode An, right, is the title of one of the Republic Commando songs. Vode is siblings, and An is all. And the adjective is after. But it can also come before. And also kind of like in English where we can say I ran quickly or I quickly ran. It's like exactly that, but also with adjectives. The house brown is good. The brown house is good. It doesn't really matter. The only time it might be confusing is if you have two things that are on either side of the adjective or adverb that could both like logically take the adjective or adverb. So whenever that happens, it's best to put it on the other side to avoid that. Standard sentence, like I said, is present tense, declarative, meaning it's a factual statement, or it's a spoken. It doesn't have to be true technically. And it's an active voice. And if you're not familiar with active voice, I'll go over it later if we have time. I don't know how long you all have.
Yeah, I
I
was
can
going to
go
say
as long as you
depends on the
need.
other guys. It's currently 10:30 here.
Okay. Yeah, I have only a few more slides. I can breeze through them.
Okay, that's fine. But it is good though. I'm enjoying it so far.
A lot of information.
Yeah.
Very good.
I try to have this one be like my lecture of everything I can cover with Mando'a to get you like familiar with it in one lesson. So, to make a sentence not declarative, but to make it interrogative, like a question, then you put tion at the beginning. If you want to make an imperative, which is a command, then you add ke to the beginning, or ke with a beten if it starts with a vowel, as usual. 1 second. Okay. So, tion, questions. So you can ask, if you put tion at the start of a sentence, just a regular statement like he is a warrior. If you put tion before that, then it's a question: is he a warrior? It's basically a verbal question mark, or equivalent of raising your voice at the end of your sentence, right? So and that is just for your yes or no questions. You just put that at the beginning. But if you want a specific question like who or what or when or where or why, then you use tion compounds like tionad. Ad is the root for persons. So tionad is like person, who, what person, and but not literally what, but just like person question mark. And then tion jor is why. It's like reason. What's the reason? And stuff like that. Tion vai. Tion vai is just vai is literally where, as in like the I don't know where I'm going. But then if you add tion vai, then it's the question where I am. Where are you going? Right. But you can ask if you want to ask what, as in like the difference between a yes or no question and a what question, I guess, is you use me. Me is short for meg or megin, which is the relative pronoun what or which or that. And that's what you use like in the middle of a sentence. Like, I don't know what you are doing right now isn't a question. What is acting as a relative pronoun or like but when you use it at the beginning of a sentence, then it is a question. Technically, it's another compound like tionad is. It's tion meg, but because what questions are so common compared to most of the other questions, it's shortened from tion meg most of the time to just me. So if you want something, like you want this is a statement. You want this. Gar kopani ibak. You want this. If I say tion gar kopani ibak, then it's do you want this? You want this question mark? Or literally question mark, you want this? If you put meg before it, or in full tion meg, but mostly just me, if you put me kopani gar, wait, I got that backwards. Want this. Okay, let me just read what I have. That's because it's easier. Me kopani is what do you want? Tion kopani is do you want? If something I haven't mentioned before, is that on top of being really simple and having few words to explain complex things, a lot of words are dropped. Like, for example, in this sentence, you is dropped. You is gar, as we mentioned before. So instead of me kopani gar, what want you, or what do you want, which would be a different question. You just drop the gar because it's not necessary. Because if you're talking directly to someone and you say mekopani, they're gonna know that you're asking them what do you want to them. And if not, then they're gonna say it again. It's like, hey, what do you want? And tion kopani, same thing, dropping the gar. It's do you want? And I guess I should have mentioned kopanir is the verb to want. Yeah. Does that make sense? In questions? I had a little bit roundabout there. Okay, so I don't have an example here for command, apparently, but a command, you just add k to the beginning. That's basically it. So if you're saying, give me the salt, you would say, without, if you were saying it as a statement, like you give me the salt, you are giving me the salt. It's something that's happening. You would say gar dinui ni, or rather gar dinui ba ni pak, or pak ba ni. That's you give salt to me. Let me say that again. Gar dinui pak ba ni. Yeah, you give salt to me. And that's a statement. If it's a question, it'd be tion. Yeah, you already got the questions. But if it was a command, you give the salt to me, you would drop the you, just like in English we drop the you when we say commands. So you would say ke dinui pak ba ni, give salt to me, with ke. So it's like saying verbal exclamation point. Exclamation point, give salt to me. And that could be shortened, obviously. You could just say ke dinu pak as like a short thing. And as I mentioned with colloquial stuff, it gets shortened a lot. So something like that, if you were saying like to your family member at the table, you might not even bother putting the imperative because they're going to know if you say to them, dinupak, then they're going to know they want you to give them the salt. So yeah, context important. Translating. This is basically it. When you translate something, you have to remember that it's not English. You have to don't translate word for word and try to translate what the word means instead. And try not to use English idioms or English like phrases. Like I don't know. There are certain grammatical structures in English that just look awkward in Mando'a. Like if you say if one thing I think I forgot to mention is that the verb to be, like is, like I am, he is, they are, is almost always dropped. It's kuyir, but it's almost always dropped. But in English, it's like almost never dropped. So you can tell when someone's translating a sentence literally word for word when they're using huir, when they're using articles. Articles are often dropped. When they're using pronouns like excessively. If you have more than like one reference to a pronoun in a sentence, or like to the same thing, then it seems excessive. Like you don't need to say I every sentence that you're talking about yourself if you've already set up in context, again, context, that the fact that you're talking about yourself. Because if you said I once, then you don't need to say it for every sentence. You can just start your sentence without a subject, just go on with the verb, because the I just carries over. The ni. So yeah, don't translate literal word for word. Try to find new words before making them. Think of how it might be worded as a Mandalorian. Like Mandalorians have their own culture, and culture and language are very connected. So how would look at the other phrases that Mandalorians have instead of English phrases. Look at the Mandalorian phrases and try to make something from them. In the same mindset. And the meme English use lot word, but Mando'a few word do trick. That's Mando'a when proper Mando'a translated literally into English looks like really broken English. And that's good because that's how you know that your sentence isn't just a cipher, isn't just code for English. And active and passive voice, if we have time, I can talk about that. It's basically, if you're not familiar what active and passive voice is, active is when the subject of the sentence does the verb. Passive is when the subject of the sentence is receiving the verb. So in English, you can say, the armor was broken, right? And the armor didn't do anything. It had something done to it. It was broken by someone. Someone wasn't mentioned, but it doesn't need to be because it's in passive. Mando'a prefers to avoid passive. If you can make something into active, then you should. For example, instead of saying that the armor was broken, you would say someone broke the armor or something like that. There's actually a phrase for that specifically, which is ashnar, a word, ashnar. if you have something that's passive and if you don't know who the action, who the doer is, who the doer of the verb is, then you can use ashnar as a stand-in, as like a someone has done this, and then you can make the rest of the sentence inactive. So like someone has broken the armor, ashnar shuku beskargam. But passive is possible. If you really want to keep passive voice in Mando'a, because you're trying to preserve English, or whatever you're translating's passive voice, then the way you do it is basically the same way you do passive in English, if you're familiar, is you use the verb to be, and you turn the verb that was active into an adjective form, or in English it's a past participle form, but it looks like the adjective form. So, for example, um, someone broke the armor is ashnar shuku beskargam. Ashnar is someone did. Shuku is the verb. Shukur is the verb to break. It's conjugated. Shuku. And beskargam means iron skin, or beskar skin, armor. So that is active because we're using the ashnar. But if we wanted that to be passive, then you would say beskargam kui, which I said kui is our to be verb, our is, or are. And then you take the verb shuku and you change it to the adjective form, shukish. So beskargam kui shukish, the armor is broken, as like an adjective. And that's how you do passive if you really want to. And then you can say de ashad, by someone, if you wanted to. So yeah, so with translating, I find that, or with practicing Mando'a, I find that translating is the best form of practice, because flashcards help some people. They never really worked for me, but if they do, that's good. But for me, translating is a better practice, because it should just be the motto, is context. Because when you write something in a sentence, it's different from just memorizing the word's definition. Because you learn how it's used, you learn collocations, so you learn words that are commonly next to it, which then helps you remember what the word means in the future. So writing full sentences, trying to translate like poetry, or like an episode of a TV, or a song lyrics, or just you know,
Or
pick
Obi-Wan
something
talking
that
to
you might
Jango Fett.
think that you could translate. Sorry, say it again.
Or Obi-Wan talking to Jango Fett from Attack of the Clones.
Mm-hmm. It's like that too. My latest endeavor is I'm translating the Ewok Adventure, Caravan of Courage.
Oh wow, that's a choice.
Well, I picked it because I want to have people voice act in it.
Nice.
Like do some practice voice spoken stuff, so that I can dub over the whole thing.
That'd be cool.
And I picked that one specifically because it has a lot of repetitive and easy dialogue, because it's a kids movie, compared to the regular Star Wars movies, which are really wordy and really verbose and operatic, but Ewoks is not that. So yeah. Oh, here we go. I had the whole passive voice slide that I forgot about. That's the thing I was saying, by the way. Verchuku Beskargam is active. The warrior breaks the armor, because the armor was broken by the warrior is passive, so we don't like that in Mando'a, so we change it to the warrior broke the armor instead. And then you can use Ashnar, someone has broken the armor. You don't have to know who Ash is, like other. Ashad is someone else, or like an other person. And Ashnar is like other has done. So yeah. There's passive voice again. And then here's a bunch of resources. I'm going to post the slides so that you can just copy these resources, or go to the links. basically everything we talked about today, background of the language, alphabet. Most of these are my videos, but not all of them. As in, not all of them being, I think only one of them isn't. The Mando creator submission form. That's for if you think you have like a good compound word that you want to add, or if you think that you have a good new root word that you want to add, you can submit those to the Mando creator. But they do have to go pass through like criteria to be accepted into it. But yeah, that's kind of just a way to help expand it. Get instead of just some person making a compound and then writing in their fic and then not giving it a definition and then no one ever knows what it means. Submit it so that people know, or like I said earlier, put it in a glossary. Here's a building sentences one, and here's Karen Travis's original grammar guide. And then here's more stuff. If you know Parjai, I'm sure you do. You anyway.
Yeah, legend.
The Parjai site is really good. Kemir'a Mando'a is a really good hub site for a lot of Mandalorian Mando'a resources specifically. And then there's the Mando Creator Dictionary, and I'll post the Mando'a.org and Mando'a.ru dictionaries, and then these are also random sentences. This is normally if I have time afterwards, I do like some random practice sentences for translating, because on Parjai's site, it's like a random sentence generator. And then the end.